Coming up, we're jumping in the time machine to go back to a year. Let's see if you can guess it based on the highlights. It was a year packed with iconic moments in music and iconic songs. From a disco song that a punk band wrote as a joke that pissed off their fans when it went to number one, to a song that a singer wrote right after he watched his girlfriend cheating right in front of him, to a rookie rock band that killed disco dead when it had the biggest hit of the year, but fell flat on their face soon after, never heard from again, to a song that contains one of the greatest misheard lyrics ever, and it came from the genius singer shouting nonsense as a filler word, only to find out later it was a real word and had deep meaning. Coming up next, groundbreaking hits from punk and new wave pioneers, and tracks that are still classic rock radio staples today. It was an eclectic year in rock history, and we're putting it under the microscope next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you ever called in to get concert tickets or an album to win it off the radio, to be like caller 15, you're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now. Click the white button and click the bell so you always know when our stuff comes out. Also, check us out at ProfessorofRock.com, our 24-hour music channel. It's like MTV, you got to check it out. Okay, let's see if you can guess the year. What are your comments below? What year do you think it was based upon the teaser? Well, it was 1979. It was a powerhouse year for music. Just taking a quick snapshot at the lineup, it's enough to blow your mind. London Calling by The Clash, Michael Jackson's Off the Wall, Breakfast in America by Supertramp, AC/DC's Highway to Hell, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers' Damn the Torpedoes. The list goes on and on and on. I mean, Led Zeppelin released In Through the Outdoor, their final album before John Bonham's tragic death, marking the end of one of rock's greatest bands. Our countdown of the top 10 songs of 1979, tough to do, but here we go. Number 10, we begin with a little Lovin', Touchin', Squeezin' with Steve Perry and Journey. Steve Perry was a hurtin' fool when he wrote Lovin', Touchin', Squeezin'. Came from real experience. He penned the song after he witnessed his girlfriend getting out of a Corvette and giving the driver of that Corvette a long, passionate kiss goodbye. It was obvious that she was cheating on him, and needless to say, it tore him up inside. You're tearing me apart. Neil Sean and I talked about the making of this great song.
We ended up, writing some incredible music together. And some of the stuff all the stuff is etched in stone for life.
Oh, yeah.
It survived the test of time and
is
here stronger than ever,
Yep.
And so I'm very proud of, that huge legacy that we've done in music.
Journey's Lovin', Touchin', Squeezin' peaked at number 16 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 12 in Canada, and gave us a highlight of what was to come in the 80s with this band. We're going to keep on trucking with our top 10 songs of 79 as we get into the number 9 spot, which is really sad story here. It's a tune by an artist whose life was cut short. She was only 45 years old. It's the late Nicolette Larson with A Lot of Love. It's gonna take a lot of love. Nicolette Larson had such a beautiful, just sensational voice. Her breakthrough came when she opened for Joan Baez in the mid-70s. Now, she was only 5 feet tall, but she could deliver a lot of power in that voice. To make this work out right. Nicolette's peers adored her. She was asked to sing on so many superstars' records. The Doobie Brothers and Christopher Cross, Emmylou Harris, Linda Ronstadt, and the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, just to name a few. In fact, it was Linda Ronstadt who nudged Nicolette into recording A Lot of Love, the track that became her biggest claim to fame. Check this out. This is nuts. A Lot of Love could have easily wound up in the trash, never to be recorded by anyone. It came close, literally being picked up from the floor of a car, messy car. Nicolette always traced the origins of her biggest hit back to one fateful moment. It was actually with Neil Young. In the late 70s, she was not only singing backup on American Stars and Bars, but she had also formed a pretty close personal relationship with Neil Young. That don't change, I'm what made. So one day while she was riding in Neil's car, she spotted a cassette tape lying on the floor, almost crushed. Curious, she picked it up, she popped it into the player, and she listened. As the song played, she was immediately struck by its pure beauty. "This is a great song," she said. Without missing a beat, Neil turned to her and said, "You want it? It's all yours." That song was A Lot of Love. It would go on to become her signature hit, forever tying her name to one of Neil Young's most unexpected gifts. I mean, again, it wouldn't have been recorded by anybody. Now, the last few years in the life of Nicolette Larson were pretty rough. She had a variety of health issues. Nicolette passed away from a cerebral edema caused by liver failure in '97, and she was only 45 years old. Really sad. Now, thankfully, she found Neil Young's song on the verge of being permanently discarded, and on the encouragement of her friend Linda Ronstadt, she turned A Lot of Love into a worldwide hit. The song climbed to number 22 in New Zealand, it went to number 11 in Australia, to number 8 here on the Billboard Hot 100, and went all the way to number 1 on the AC chart in Canada. Coming in at the 8th spot on our countdown to 79, it's the band that's been called Sons of Beatles. The Sons of the Beatles. With a genius as their lead singer, I'm talking about Don't Bring Me Down by ELO, Electric Light Orchestra. Don't Bring Me Down was written at the last minute by Jeff Lynne. Guess he was almost finished recording the material for the ELO album Discovery, but he felt the record lacked an edge. So I actually turned on the inspiration for something loud. What Jeff came up with was Don't Bring Me Down. It's a track that he called a big galloping ball of distortion. I love that. Besides being a flat-out jam, Don't Bring Me Down is most notable for one of rock's most misinterpreted lyrics. I'm talking about that chorus. Don't bring me down, Bruce. Yeah, Don't Bring Me Down, Bruce. But everyone, including me when I was a little kid, if you grew up listening to Don't Bring Me Down, you thought he was saying Bruce. Don't bring me down, Bruce. Now, Jeff originally used Bruce as a placeholder while he was improvising the lyrics for Don't Bring Me Down. He just screamed a random word in the chorus just to simply fill a gap in the vocals. He's going to come back to it later. But when ELO's German engineer Reinhold Mack heard the demo, he was surprised and he asked Lynn how he knew what Gruß meant. It meant greetings in German. Actually, Jeff didn't know that. It was just a random sound he'd thrown in, like I said, but he liked the way that it fit, the way it sounded. So instead of changing it, he decided just to leave it in. Don't bring me down. That accidental wordplay became one of the song's most recognizable quirks. And just like that, ELO had one of their biggest hits built on another happy accident. Actually, Don't Bring Me Down was the biggest hit in America for ELO. It went to number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100. That's right, they never had a number 1. In the UK, the single rose to number 3. In Switzerland and Austria, it went to number 2, and it went all the way to number 1 in Canada. I said that a lot. Don't Bring Me Down ends with the sound of a door slamming shut, and it wasn't a simulated effect. It's a real sound that came from the shutting of a metal door at the Musicland Studios, the site of the track's recording, and they left that in as well. All right, my friends, next on the countdown of the top 10 songs of 79, it's a song from one of rock's great female chameleons, whose band could write songs and rule the charts in any genre, I swear. Talking about Blondie with a song they used to play live just to piss people off. Coming in at number 7, I've got Heart of Glass from the monster-selling Parallel Lines LP. Blondie's Debbie Harry and Chris Stein wrote Heart of Glass in this tiny, rundown New York apartment they had where they used to watch pro wrestling together. But Jimmy Destry was the one that came up with the signature synth hook. What started off as, really a goof, it evolved into a perfect fusion of punk and disco that got everybody on the dance floor, whether they liked it or not. Debbie Harry acknowledging that when they recorded it, playing disco wasn't exactly cool in that scene. After all, Blondie came from the CBGB punk scene in the Village in New York City, of course, but These guys made Heart of Glass specifically because they wanted to be uncool. The track was built around a rolling rhythm machine, and laying down that backing track alone took over 10 hours. Now, neither the band nor big hit producer Mike Chapman ever expected it to be a success. The only reason they added the song to Parallel Lines was to include a little diversity in their music. It was intended to be just a novelty, really, a joke. When Debbie Harry and Chris Stein first wrote Heart of Glass back in 1974, shortly after they met, they didn't even have a proper title for it. They just called it the disco song. It wasn't until they recorded it in 1978 that Stein finally came up with the name Heart of Glass. Now, he was completely unaware that it was also the title of a 1976 German film by Werner Herzog. Debbie said, "The Heart of Glass was inspired by a stalker who was after her. She said, Chris saved me from him. Trying to find a good rhyme for glass that actually worked in the song can be a real pain in the ass." Debbie Harry leaned right into that in the final chorus of Heart of Glass, switching up the lyrics to sing "Soon Turned Out to Be a Pain in the Ass." It's a pivotal moment in the tune where the narrator realizes that the relationship isn't worth the trouble, and maybe the Heart of Glass is tougher than she thought. Her Heart of Glass, anyway.
Soon turned out to be a pain in the ass.
Since American radio wasn't exactly tolerant of the A word back then, radio stations got a censor version where the line was swapped out for the much tamer "Soon Turned Out I Had a Heart of Glass." Not quite as fun or as well-meaning, but hey, at least it still rhymed. But it actually blew past a lot of censors, and it was left in because a lot of those that didn't hear it. It also made their diehard new wave and punk fans livid that they were doing a disco song. But much to the chagrin of the Blondie purists, Heart of Glass was a smash. It topped the charts in Australia, New Zealand, Austria, Canada, Switzerland, the UK, and here on the Billboard Hot 100, the US. Coming in at number 6, I've got a band that I think they're the most underappreciated band of the 70s. Love their songs, love their albums, and they had a masterpiece in 1979. Even if the critics didn't give them credit, it's an album that still lines up today. And I think this is the song, the real classic from this album. At number 6, I've got "Take the Long Way Home" by Supertramp from Breakfast in America. Now, just before Supertramp headed into the studio to record Breakfast in America, a co-lead singer, Roger Hodgson, stated that one particular song came together at the last minute, almost as a happy accident, as a pleasant surprise. When the album was first presented to the press, Roger explained that "Take the Long Way Home" was that song. It's about a guy who's convinced he's the real deal. A self-proclaimed Romeo playing out his role in a glamorous fantasy. But the twist here is he's the only one who buys into that illusion. Everyone else sees right through it, and the reality is far less dazzling. Roger would say, and I quote, "There are times when he feels like he's just part of the background, blending into the scenery like the greenery that's fallen away. But in reality, he's the joke of the neighborhood, always trying to rationalize his situation with the line, 'Why should you care if you're feeling good?' Now, his wife, on the other hand, she sees him as nothing more than a part of the furniture, someone who's just there, blending in with the mundane, if you will. He can't escape the fact that in his everyday life, he never sees what he wants to see." Roger would go on to say that when he's on stage, though, everything changes. It's so unbelievable, unforgettable, the way the crowd adores him. In those moments, he feels like a superstar. The attention is all on him. Yet his wife seems to think he's losing his grip on reality, and she questions, does it feel like your life's become a catastrophe? In those tough moments, he realizes that in order to grow, sometimes you have to go through that chaos. It's hard not to think that this song isn't biographical, as the very private Hodgson seems to be giving listeners a view into his soul, maybe his inner demons. Now, Roger would say that Take the Long Way Home is really a metaphor for that thorny path of self-discovery. The song serves as a mirror, reflecting on how the sometimes disappointing realities of adulthood can really cast a shadow on the hopeful idealism we had in our youth. He said, a lot of my songs have layers, and the deeper meaning of this one is about taking the long way home, not just the physical route, but the path that leads us back to our true home, the place of real connection deep within our hearts. And every Supertramp record, it was so meticulously crafted. Roger delivered a passionately vocal on this one and played a mix of piano and acoustic guitar on the track. Rick Davies played the mesmerizing harmonica part, really one of the most iconic harmonica parts ever. And the keyboard sections were played by him as well. And then John Hellowell played that sax. Take the Long Way Home was the third single drop from Breakfast in America, and that had its greatest success in North America, went to number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100, but number 4 in Canada. I'll leave you with this little nugget. Supertramp was offered $5 million by Greyhound Bus to use this song in a TV advertising campaign, but they turned down the offer cold. Pretty cool. Moving along, the countdown of the top 10 songs of 79 halfway through. I got a song that Van Halen hated, but they couldn't stop the record label from releasing it as the single. From Van Halen 2, I got Dance the Night Away. Originally, the song was called Dance Lolita Dance, and when it came time to pick the first single off Van Halen 2, their great follow-up to their debut, Warner Brothers insisted the title be changed to Dance the Night Away, and it had to be the lead single, that's what they said. The band wasn't thrilled about this at all. It felt like it didn't capture their real true sound, and they pushed back. Here's the thing, though. Not long before this, Van Halen was playing to half-empty clubs in LA. They hadn't built up the clout to go head-to-head with their record label quite yet. So in the end, the song was released just as Warner Brothers wanted and asked for. Any Van Halen fan knows that Diamond Dave always had a knack for coming up with wild explanations for his song lyrics, and Dance the Night Away was no exception. Now, according to Dave, the song was inspired by a girl who had been caught up in a little parking lot romance outside the club where Van Halen was playing. And when she came back inside, she was walking around with her pants on backwards. She started dancing in front of the band, and that, according to Dave, is what sparked the idea for this song.
From across the room, yes, it's love in the third degree.
Now, you can't help but laugh and go along with whatever crazy story Dave spins, but it's always entertaining. Dance the Night Away is one of the rare instances in Van Halen's career where a guitar solo was actually left out. They spent a lot of time trying to perfect it, but it never clicked. According to Eddie, the original solo for the song was almost identical to the one in Jump. If you're a guitar player, give it a shot yourself and you'll see exactly why it didn't make the cut. Dance the Night Away was Van Halen's second entry in the top 40. It peaked at number 28 in Canada and went to number 15 on the Billboard Hot 100, their biggest hit at that time. I want to give special props to Michael Anthony on this one. He co-wrote Dance the Night Away, and he delivered those big backup vocals on the chorus that helped make it such a great feel-good song. On with the top 10 songs of 79 countdown. At number 4, I've got the Sultans. The Sultans of Swing by Dire Straits.
We're the Sultans of Swing.
You know, Mark Knopfler originally wrote Sultans of Swing on a National steel guitar using an open tuning. At first, he wasn't too impressed with the song. He called it pretty dull. But everything changed when he bought his first Fender Stratocaster in '77. Soon as he played the song on that 61 Strat, it was like magic. The song suddenly came alive, and new chord changes just seemed to fall into place effortlessly. Mark got the idea for Sultans of Swing from watching a pretty terrible band playing. The story goes that Mark was in Ipswich on a rainy night and decided to duck into a bar. When he was inside, there was a mediocre band playing to a crowd of maybe like 4 or 5 drunks who didn't seem to notice much. As they wrapped up their set, the lead singer, without a hint of irony, I might add, said good night and thank you. We are the Sultans of Swing.
We are the Sultans of Swing.
When Mark heard this, he just burst into laughter. He later said, when they said thank you very much, we are the Sultans of Swing, there's just something really funny about it. I mean, Sultans, they absolutely were not. They were just a bunch of tired guys in pullovers.
Yeah, the Sultans that play Creole.
Now, Sultans of Swing, that was the breakout track for Mark Knopfler and Dire Straits. I mean, the hooky guitar licks and Mark Knopfler's bluesy storytelling, that was a fresh departure from most of the songs that were played on AM radio back in '79. Song surged up the charts. It went to number 8 in the UK, number 6 in Australia, number 4 in Canada, and here on the Billboard Hot 100 in America, and number 3 in South Africa. Oh man, we're to the top 3. This top 3 is so good. It could go up against any year in music, seriously. Getting down to the nitty gritty, we come to one of those infectious, most immediate hit songs of the rock era. It's the phenomenon that comes in at number 3. Our countdown to 79, a phenomenon by the name of the Knack with My Sharona. The Knack was one of the most incredible stories in the music industry, not only in 1979, but ever. I mean, a band with zero buzz before they released their debut album became scorching hot overnight, all because of an undeniable flash of bottle lightning called My Sharona. Now, Doug Feiger, lead singer of the Knack, he wrote the lyrics to My Sharona about a girl he was obsessed with. It all started when Doug was in a long-term relationship, by the way, happened to walk into a clothing store with his girlfriend. There he met Sharona Alperin, a high school student working at the store. Now, despite the fact that Sharona had a boyfriend, he had a girlfriend, and he was 8 years older than her, Doug immediately went on the pursuit. He was smitten. In fact, he wrote My Sharona in minutes after he met her. He fell hard, and with no hesitation at all, he invited her to one of the Knack shows, much to the surprise of his girlfriend who was there with him when he was in the store. Like I said, it's crazy. Long after that first meeting at the clothing store, Doug broke up with his girlfriend, and he made it clear to Sharona that he was interested in only her. Even though Doug was unattached, it was still complicated because Sharona still had a boyfriend that she liked. And he would often go with her to the Knack shows. The situation was worse when My Sharona became a thing, for sure. Actually, about a year after they first met, Sharona finally gave in and they started dating. She joined Doug on tour, and as My Sharona began to surge, she watched as the song he wrote about her helped catapult the band to stardom, put her in the spotlight as well. Sharona and Doug were together for about, I think it was 4 years, even getting engaged at one point in that 4 years. But the rock and roll lifestyle, along with Doug's struggles with alcoholism, eventually took its toll on the couple. It just became too much for Sharona, and that ended their romantic relationship. But man, this song was massive. And it killed disco dead. It sold 10 million copies. It was actually a bigger seller than the Beatles' debut. Biggest debut single ever at that time. In fact, Capitol postured them as the second coming of the Beatles, and the music press resented them for it. They were very critical of this band. There was so much backlash, and as fast as they rose, they fell. Follow-up single, Girls Don't, that went to number 11 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 1 in Canada, but the heat on the Knack just started to cool off. Capitol rushed the release of the second album out, to keep the momentum going. However, the lead single from that record, Baby Talks Dirty, that barely charted at number 38, and their next single stiffed at number 62. The Knack was a flare that died out pretty fast. But My Sharona was a stone-cold smash for the ages. By the way, the iconic riff on My Sharona was inspired by Elvis Costello's Pump It Up. So after the spectacular run of My Sharona, the band all but vanished. as did the song's namesake, Sharona. She would say that after her breakup with singer Doug Fieger, she needed to become her own Sharona, not someone else's. In other words, no more my Sharona. Later, the two did become friends, but sadly, Doug Fieger passed away from cancer on February 14, 2010. As for Sharona, she carved out a successful career of her own, becoming a high-end real estate agent in California, where she specializes in working with celebrity clients. Man, My Sharona, it was the biggest song of 79. It spent 6 weeks at the top. It hit number 1 in Australia and Canada and Japan. It was massive. Not many songs like that one. So we've reached the bridesmaid position, number 2 on the top 10 songs of 79. And this was another track that defied the odds, rising above the competition despite plenty of skepticism. At number 2, I got Michael McDonald and the Doobie Brothers with What a Fool Believes. Michael McDonald and Kenny Loggins teamed up to write What a Fool Believes, but the story behind how it all came together, it's as great as the song itself. I sat down with Kenny and Michael for the full story. Here's what they said.
It was a germ of an idea. I had like a verse of lyrics and just kind of that piano riff for the verse. No bridge or chorus, anything like that. And I kept promising Ted Temple and I would finish it someday.
So I put out a feeler to try and catch up with him through management stuff. And simultaneously, I got a message that he was looking for me to write with me because he likes to collaborate. So we made a writing date, and I went over to his house.
We got together, made plans to write. So he came down to my house in L.A., and I was running through a bunch of ideas, looking at lyrics, just trying to come up with anything that, might be a place to start for us with a song. And that was certainly one of them. I was kind of playing it at the piano, trying to imagine if that would be something that Kenny would even be interested in. I think I was playing it for my sister, who was cleaning the house frantically in anticipation of Kenny Loggins showing up. Because I was a bachelor then, and there was piles of ashtrays and empty beer cans and stuff on the piano. And she felt I could make a better presentation as a human being. So she was madly cleaning up around me, and I played that one thing for her. She said, "That's nice." I was playing her everything, a little bit of everything that I had that wasn't finished or wasn't, that I thought might be a good start for us. When the doorbell rang,
I was unloading my guitar out of my trunk. The door to his house was open, and I heard him playing the piano. And as I'm walking up to the door, I hear, which ironically became the actual lyric of the song. And so he's singing this melody, and he stopped. And my imagination kept going. And so I knock on the door and I say, "Mike, hey, hi, we shake hands." I say, "I think I know the next section to that thing you were playing."
What a Fool Believes took over the number 1 spot on the Billboard Hot 100 here and in Canada. It was in April of 79, and it won Grammys for Song of the Year and Record of the Year. It actually stopped like 6 months straight of disco songs hitting number 1 and interrupted disco, so that was good. All right, it's time to unveil the number 1 spot, my number 1 pick for the best songs of 1979. This one's a scorcher. It's not just a personal favorite, it's become a family anthem. Whenever it comes on, we crank it up and everybody participates, we'll say. No song gets us moving like this one. Marked the first top 20 hit for a 5-piece band out of Boston and served as the lead single from their second album, Candy O. Taking the top spot on our countdown of the greatest songs of 1979, I got the Cars with Let's Go. Now, Rick Ocasek wrote most of the lyrics for the Cars, that much is true. But he would often prefer his bandmate Benjamin Orr to perform the lead vocals on his songs. That's what happened on Let's Go. Rick Ocasek penned songs sung by the great Benjamin Orr. So it all started in 1968. Rick Ocasek had a band in Columbus, Ohio with a name that couldn't have been more fitting for the era, ID Nirvana. One night, a young musician named Ben Orr showed up at one of their gigs. After the show, Ben introduced himself, mentioning that he was a singer. Intrigued, Rick invited him over, and when Ben sat down and sang the Beatles Yesterday, Rick was floored. He later said it was the sweetest voice he'd ever heard. By the next day, Ben was in the band, and from that moment on, he was in every band that Rick put together, right up to and through the Cars. The two became inseparable, best friends who spent nearly all their time together, even living across the street from each other at one point. Rick was a very observant cat. That's why he was such a great writer. He would notice personalities and actions from those around him and zero in on a song lyric from there. For Let's Go, he actually witnessed a guy trying to get with a beautiful girl that was way out of his league, but she keeps turning him down. So he decided to write about it. The girl he wrote about oozes confidence and knows that she is the object of desire. It's the free spirit of Let's Go that inspired the song, and it's a track that showcases what made the Cars such a cool band, one of the coolest ever. It was already a catchy song, but when the band put the hand claps in it, it took it to another level entirely. In fact, there are urban legends, I've mentioned this before, that the hand claps have caused listeners to run off the road. And I can relate to that. One of the only car wrecks I've ever been in was because I was doing hand claps to this song while I was driving when I was a teenager. The hand claps are an actual nod to a song they loved from their youth called Let's Go by the Rooters. It was number 19 on the Billboard Hot 162, I believe.
Let's go! Let's go!
I mean, for my money, this is the Cars' best song, and that's saying something because they've had so many great ones. I mean, there's so many highlights in this song that I could talk about for hours, least of which is Elliot Easton's magical guitar playing. I mean, his tone is sharp on this one, punchy. He uses a blend of compression and slide overdrive, I read, ensuring his guitar would cut through Greg Hawkes' dominant synth lines. Produced by Roy Thomas Baker, Let's Go climbed to number 5 in Canada, number 6 in Australia, and it went to number 14 here on the Billboard Hot 100. Should have been a number 1 hit. In my house, it is a number 1 hit. That's the number 1 song of our countdown. I gotta go with some honorable mentions though here. Driver's Seat by Sniffin' the Tears. And I Was Made for Lovin' You by Kiss.
Just take your place in the driver's seat.
Thanks so much for watching. Man, what a great year 1979 was. What do you think? What is your top 10 in 1979? What do you think is the best of the 10 that I talked about? What are the best albums of 79? It's kind of like the 80s started in 1979. It really began with the Cars in 78 with their debut album. They started the 80s off early. What are your memories of these songs? Let's have a great discussion and celebrate one of the greatest years in rock history, 1979. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe. Till next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.